It was about 2 in the morning. I was lying awake.
I thought by the look of you might have been sleeping badly.
With so much distress, Doctor.
You may consult Dr. Watson about your insomnia later. Please, go on.
I heard a sound in the corridor outside my room. A dull, muffled sound. I got up, opened my door. Mr. Holmes, I believe I'm as strong-nerved as any man, but the corridor was dark. Only one window, halfway along, threw a patch of light, pale light, on the floor. And into it, something was emerging. Something dark, crouching, and it was he. Crawling. No, creeping, not quite on his hands and knees, more. Good God. More on his hands and feet, his face sunk between his hands. Creeping, but with ease. His eyes darting, and I was paralyzed. What's that?
It's only the bell downstairs.
The bell?
The doorbell. A caller.
Who could it be?
Be calm, Mr. Bennett. Mrs. Hudson will discover who.
I'm sorry, Jack.
It's all right.
I knew I'd find you here, and I simply had to see you. After what happened last night, I just couldn't wait for you to return. I couldn't remain another night in that... Mr. Holmes, I do apologise for this intrusion and, for my agitation.
Think nothing of that, Miss Presbury. Any fresh light you may throw on your father's case will be most welcome.
Shall I have Mrs. Hudson bring up some tea?
No, thank you, Dr. Watson. I'm quite recovered.
Do you feel able now to tell us what happened last night?
Go ahead, Edith. We may speak as freely to Dr. Watson as to Mr. Holmes.
Of course you may, of course you may. Do sit down, Miss Presbury. Yes, we'll hear your account of last night's new evidence a little later. First, I'd like to hear more of your impressions of the change in your father since his engagement to Miss Morphy.
Alice.
Miss Alice Morphy, to whom your father became engaged in...
In June.
Within days of that happy but unexpected...
Well, yes, it was rather...
Yes, within days of that happy but unexpected announcement, he disappears to Prague and returns an altered man. Tell us a little more about that.
I don't quite see what you want me
I
to...
confess neither do I, Mr. Holmes. After what I have told you, and when Edith has experienced something we haven't
Your
yet...
fiancé will, I'm sure, confirm, Miss Presbury, that complete frankness is essential if we're to unravel this case, and complete trust in my method.
Jack? Very well. It was early in June. Very fine. Warm, as you'll no doubt remember. That day he was taking tea with the Morphys. Professor Morphy is his closest colleague. And I knew he and Alice were... they shared many interests. My interests... Anyway, I didn't go with him that day. I often did, but on that afternoon I'd been strangely restless, a slight headache, and the piano and my music is a great comfort to me.
Good afternoon, Edith.
Father, and Alice. How are you, Alice?
I'm well, Edith. We could hear you playing as we came across the garden. Very sweet.
Sweet and sad. When I'm in this headachy mood, I begin with such a piece, then move to something more light and jolly.
And that is restorative.
Restorative? Well, yes. It helps, sometimes.
How curious. But then you are artistic. All I can do in such a condition is lie down in a darkened room after taking one of my father's elixirs.
Is your father well?
Oh, yes. And perhaps imbibing elixirs of a different kind right now.
Imbibing?
In celebration, Edith. And perhaps you will play something more jolly now. Something downright joyful, I'd hope.
Something epithalamial. Is that the word?
It is. Up, fair bride, and call thy stars from out their several boxes. Take thy, diamonds...
Rubies. Rubies, pearls, and diamonds.
Yes, and make thyself a constellation. A marriage song by John Donne.
Oh, I don't care for him. Mother used to read his sermons to me.
Oh, but in his youth, Alice, such lines he could spin. Love all alike no season knows, nor clime, nor hours, days, months, which are the rags of time.
But I summon Ben Jonson to my case, dear George, when it comes to done.
George? You called my father...
Miss Morphy, your longtime friend Alice, and now my Alice too, has done me the stunning honour of agreeing to be my wife. Now, where's that young Jack of yours?
Jack?
He must share in the celebration, must my fine young Mr. Bennet. In the laboratory, is he?
I think so, yes.
Industrious fellow. Bennett's last task today shall be to bring up a bottle of our finest, and you, my pretty pale daughter, shall play. Hey!
You are pale, Edith, and I think in no mood for playing.
No. No, I don't think
This
I can.
has come as an utter surprise to you.
Well, of course. There's been no hint that such a thing...
I know. We have been very discreet. We allowed no suggestion that matters were developing in this way until we were entirely sure of each other. Today was his third proposal, in fact.
Alice? Thomas Wellwood. You and he, I thought, were...
Young Mr. Wellwood is pleasant company, and I know he has high hopes, indeed high intention of making his career in the bank a sound one. But no more than sound. There are no Newtons or Galileos in the science of money. But your father's work now, and further attainments are ahead for him. You must know that. I'm not speaking of merely material success, Edith. Your father's work of itself is endlessly fascinating to me.
Alice?
Yes?
I think I must take your advice. This headache is one of the more immovable ones. I'd best go and lie down for a while.
Of course. We'll talk more later.
Excuse me, Alice.
Edith?
I'm sorry, Alice. I do feel rather faint.
Oh, a moment only. You and I have been friends since childhood. I want us still to be friends.
Do you?
Well, of course. And more than that. Let me be frank. When your father and I are married, we will, of course, live here. But you mustn't think of me as your... Oh, but that's too absurd even to say. We shall be like sisters, Edith. Sisters.
Edith?
Miss Presbury, are you feeling unwell?
What is it, Edith? Dr. Watson?
There's no need to continue if you don't feel up to it. You've told us enough for the moment.
I must tell you about last night.
Edith, if you're unwell, you mustn't force yourself to say
It was
more.
Roy that woke me, I think. Certainly he was barking from the stables when I was fully awake. And I know I was. I was awake. I remember thinking, is my door locked? But of course, it always is these days. The moonlight at the window was very bright. I could see quite clearly what was there.
What was there? At the window, you mean?
In the square of light. My father.
What?
My father's face. Pressed against the window pane.
But your room it's on the second floor.
One of his hands was raised, as if he'd been about to push the window up. If that window had started to rise, I know I'd have gone mad. There have been times when I thought I am already, but it was no delusion. He was there for about 20 seconds or so, and I couldn't move. Even when he vanished, I still couldn't budge. Paralysed. All I could do was lie and shiver until dawn. Then at breakfast, he didn't mention it.
And did you...
No. I made an excuse to come to town. Here I am.
Curious. Most curious.
Curious? It's uncanny.
But last night, so soon, that is curious.
Do you have something in mind, Holmes?
Yes, an inn in Cambridge. You, Mr. Bennet, shall return to your duties with as normal a manner as you can pretend, while your fiancée remains in London. Your visit can be prolonged, Miss Presbury.
Yes, easily.
Yes, and you and I, Watson, if you can without too much inconvenience, uproot yourself from practice and domesticity. You and I shall, for the next few days, be in the most pleasant surroundings of that ancient and commendable hostel, the Chequers Inn. The linen is above reproach, the port above mediocrity. There now. You agree about the port?
Very fine.
And now that we're properly refreshed, we're fit to discuss the case. What's your opinion?
Mine? You want my opinion?
Why shouldn't I?
These days, Holmes, I think I have become little more than a habit to you. Like a violin or your old black pipe. Sometimes you condescend to think aloud in my presence, but wouldn't it be as useful to address your pipe or that glass in your hand?
Indeed no, Watson. My pipe doesn't register what I say, nor does it interject as you do.
Kind of you to say so.
Now, when Bennett found Pressbury creeping along the corridor at night in that strange, stooped position, what do you make of that?
Well, as a medical man, I've known a severe attack of lumbago make a person walk in such a way.
Lumbago?
An affliction that can certainly be trying to the temper.
Let's not be too flat-footed, Watson. Bennett told us that he was able to walk erect again.
I was joking, Holmes.
And the change in Pressbury's character, his mysterious trip abroad. Have you something suitably facetious to say about those aspects of his case?
No. Speaking in all seriousness as a medical man, I believe it's a case for an alienist. A quite elderly gentleman falls in love, seriously so, with a much younger woman. His cerebral processes are disturbed by the affair. His journey to Prague may be a last and futile attempt to break himself of the passion.
Something in there. And the secret letters and packages in the locked box.
They may not even be directly connected. Some other private transaction, a loan perhaps, or share certificates.
Huh? And the Wolfhound disapproves of this financial dealing. No, there's more to it all than this. All connected.
And how do you propose we find out what more there is?
In the morning, we confront Pressbury.
And cajole an explanation from him.
Unlikely, but I'd value a good close look at him. His daughter's told us that he seems to have little or no memory of those times when he's altered. I've thought of a bold and provoking approach to take advantage of that fact.
And are you familiar with Cambridge, Mr. Holmes?
I have been summoned here before.
That would suggest you are here, what's the phrase, on a case?
We are, yes, but we don't yet know quite how time-consuming it might be.
Then I must consume as little of your time as possible. What can I do for you, gentlemen?
What can you do for us?
I'm sorry?
That was the question I was about to put to you.
To me?
Yes. You see, I heard, through an agent of mine, that Professor Pressbury of Cambridge had need of my services. There is only one Professor Pressbury, I'm sure.
Indeed, there is only one.
And on the 26th of last month, you don't recollect communicating with my agent?
It is not a matter of recollection. At no time have I considered dealing with any detective.
Then my agent must be in error. We can only apologize for troubling you, Professor.
Just a moment, gentlemen. Perhaps my agent can throw some light on the matter. It's not every day a man gets the opportunity to assist a detective of your stature. And your informant, Mr. Holmes, would I know his name?
I doubt it very much. And my business is, in this respect, like the good doctors here. There must be the strictest confidentiality between investigator and client.
Oh, I too put great value on confidentiality. Bennett?
Yes, sir.
These two gentlemen have come from London under the impression that they have been summoned. Do you know them?
Know them, sir?
Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson.
Well, of course I know of them.
Please, trouble yourself no more, Professor Pressbury.
No trouble, Mr. Holmes. You handle all my correspondence, don't you, Bennett?
Yes, sir.
And have you a note of any kind, of any communication going to Mr. Holmes, or any letter, telegram, any scrap of paper at all, to or from any third party concerning this, Mr. Holmes?
Nothing at all, sir.
And perhaps you'd show these misplaced and mistaken gentlemen out, and return to me at once.
His nerves are in extreme disorder. We'd best return to him quickly, Mr. Bennett.
I fear you may be in for a rather uncomfortable time.
And still, I hate to tell the man lies.
Let him have his own way as far as you can. Try to cross him as little as possible.
Before you go, which is Miss Pressbury's bedroom window?
Second floor, third from the right. And you'd better have this, Mr. Holmes.
What is it?
It's the address of the man in London with whom the professor is secretly communicating.
Well, now.
He wrote to him this morning, and I got it from his blotting paper. I must go, and please, clear all this up soon.
Well, the blotting paper, indeed. Yes, that young man has the makings of a detective, Watson. Yes, Dvorak. Curious name.